A very beautiful afternoon to each and every one of us on the call, and thank you for joining in right on time. I see a lot of us were here even before the 2 p.m. mark. Thank you so much for joining in. And before we dive right into the webinar, I would just love us to do one thing. Please go on your social media and share this meeting with your friends, your colleagues, and virtually people amongst your network. You can do that on your WhatsApp, you can do that on your Facebook. Ensure that you have friends who are joining in and enjoying this conversation with you. And then while we do that, you can also go right into the comment section to tell us who you are and where you're joining in from. Thank you so much. We would love to meet ourselves in the comment section, just your name and where you are joining in from. Thank you. All right, I can see a couple of comments in the comment section. Hi, Praise. It's nice to meet you again. Also, we have Hassana joining in from Abuja. Thank you, Ma, for joining. We have Fatima from Bauchi. We have Rachel saying good afternoon. Hi, Rachel. Also, we have Amina from Borno. We have Fola Shadi from Bauchi, Victoria from Bauchi, Sepwa from Jos. Hi, Sepwa. And so many of us, please. I know we may be having a sort of reunion in the comment section. Feel free to drop where you're joining in from and what your name is. Yes, I can also see Rhoda. These are amazing people from our network and Young Leaders Network, and it's so heartwarming to see that we are joining in on this call. Nureni, you're welcome. And Rhoda, Usman, and Yusuf, nice to have you on this call. And I believe today we're going to be having an amazing time here. It is not our culture in YLM to waste anyone's time. So when we call for meetings like this, best believe that you'll be having the best of times. And so I encourage us all, ensure you have your writing materials close by because the wealth of resources we have on this call in person of the speakers we have on this call, from the keynote speakers to our panelists, are people who have vast experience around this issue under consideration, that is financing of gender responsive education. So please have your writing parts close to you, take notes, write down questions so that you'll be able to engage even, after the session and be able to gain clarity on practical actions, because the webinar is concentrating on what are the practical pathways we can take. It's beyond conversation. It's beyond, you know, just
Can you unmute? We can't hear you.
Oh my God, I have been talking. All right, thank you so much, everyone. And I caught a lot of names from the comment section. Okay, so hi everyone in the comment section, and thank you for joining in. It's so heartwarming to have all of us around. And so I was saying that it's good we have we come with the mind of learning. Ensure you have your writing materials with you. Don't just come to listen, but come to take notes, come ready to take action, because the crux of this conversation is not just that we talk, but after talking, what are the practical pathways all of us here can explore? Because each and every one of us here is a key stakeholder, when it comes to ensuring that education that we receive, especially at the grassroots, is gender responsive. So thank you so much, everyone. I believe we're going to be having a nice time. At this juncture, I will be handing over to the moderator of the day. Please jam your hands together for my executive director. He is the moderator of the day, and I want to assure you that we are going to be having a swell time. Can we put our digital hands together for Mr. Sheon Justin Onarinde as he takes us through the day's webinar? Thank you so much. You are muted, sir.
Same here. So thank you. Thank you, Noadia, and everyone for taking time to join this amazing conversation. In order not to waste much of our time, let me invite our head of programs to give us the welcoming, and then how we set the stage on why we're here and what we are going to be achieving by the end of the day. So kindly put your hands again, your digital hands, for Miss Charity Solomon to officially welcome you all to today's meeting.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sheon. Thank you, Nadia, for getting the ball rolling. So, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Young Leaders Network, I want to say a huge thank you for being here. We are gathered for a conversation that really matters, right? Making sure the money meant for education actually reaches the girls who need it most. Let's be honest, with over 10 million children out of school in Nigeria, girls paying the heaviest price. We can't just keep asking for more money. We have to ask other questions like who is really benefiting from these funds, and are these budgets solving the real problems girls are facing every day? And that's why we are here. Through our SAGE project in Bauchi State, which we're implementing in partnership with the Malala Funds, the Ministry of Education, Bauchi, as well as the Agile Project Bauchi, we have made a huge stride. We've successfully put in place the gender in education policy, and have also created a school reentry guidelines for married and pregnant girls, giving them a second chance at a future. We also have launched a budget dashboard and hold quarterly review meetings to make sure every naira is accounted for in Bauchi State. Today, we are taking a step further, finding practical, fair, and accountable ways to finance girls' education, especially at the state and community levels. And the good news is that what we agree on today is directly going to shape the Bauchi State Gender Responsive Education Financing Framework. A special thank you to our speakers, Mr. Stanley, Dr. Hassana, and Mr. Ahmed, and our senior colleagues here present also, Dr. Carlo Aja, Mr. Shola Fagosi, and Sani Mohammed from Kano for joining us. We are also deeply grateful to Malala Funds for believing in this mission and then for funding this initiative. To everyone here in the room, government partners, advocates, friends, and colleagues, please speak up. Feel free. It's a learning ground. Your experience is exactly what we need to find the answers. Thank you so much, everyone, for
All right. Thank you so much, Charity Solomon, for that welcoming. It's good to
mic
see
over to
people
Mr. Shion.
online. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Nicholas want to see the HOP's face. All right. I understand what is happening. So it's good to see people online, people from different parts of the country. I know it took a lot of sacrifice for many of us to join the meeting, and I'm super excited to see all of you. I'm sure Charity from our welcoming, she already welcomed most of us. Our conversation should not be extended today, so I will want to jump most of the protocols where possible. The reason is because I want to see how I think the conversation is very rich, and personally, I can't wait to get into the conversation. At this point, I want to just frame the conversation, and I want to give us some background to why this webinar is happening. Let me appreciate our distinguished keynote speaker, Mr. Stanley Ochonu, and our respected panelists and government officials, people from Ministry of Education, for joining this conversation. The central question before us today is not just about how much are we spending on education. I think that information is known to some extent. In this webinar, the most important questions are: who benefits from that spending? Who remains excluded? What barriers are public resources removing, right? That stops girls and boys from getting the quality education they deserve. Are approved allocations, are they actually released? Are those resources producing measurable improvements in enrollment, safety, learning, retention, and completion, especially for girls facing the greatest disadvantages? Well, that is the heart of the gender responsive education financing. We all know what UNESCO is saying globally, that low and lower middle income countries like Nigeria, we face an estimated annual education financing gap of $97 billion if we want to achieve the SDGs by 2030, right? In Nigeria, of course, Charity mentioned over 10.2 million primary school age children, 8.1 million junior secondary school age children, they are out of school. 74% of these children, those of them aged from 7 to 14, they lack basic reading and mathematics skills. These figures tells us that the education crisis is not only about enrollment, it is also about who learns, who remains in school, who completes their schooling, and who is quietly pushed out. I will tell you some data that will amaze you on people who are quietly pushed out of the education. But before then, for many girls, exclusion has a price tag. For instance, poverty can force a girl to walk during school hours, right? Distance may make her journey unsafe. The absence of a private toilet may keep her away from during menstruation. Many of us know our schools don't have toilets. Marriage or pregnancy can even interrupt her education. So when Charity said we've helped and supported to develop the reentry guideline, of course, this guideline may guarantee her return to school, but without a counselor, without a catch-up or follow-up program for her to catch up what she has lost, without a proper referral system, in fact, even some childcare support or budget, that right may exist only on paper. So a policy alone does not remove the barrier. There must be a finance intervention, right? So this is very, very critical. Financing girls' education is not charity. I don't want us to look at it from charity perspective. It is actually an investment in human capital. It's an investment on public health. It's an investment on poverty reduction, economic growth, social stability, and national development. So when we talk about gender education financing, we are not saying create a separate education system for girls. No, no, no. We are saying recognize that gender, poverty, disability, geography, and insecurity affects learners differently. And so we must ensure that public expenditure responds deliberately to those differences. So this is very, very important. I shared earlier that I'm going to tell us some of the issues of the gap, right? Let me tell you those who are quietly pushed out of the system. For Bauchi State, for instance, the public primary and pre-primary schools enrollment is 1.14 million pupils. But guess what? Only 213,600 learners are in junior secondary schools. and only about 98,300 are in public secondary schools, senior secondary schools. So do you observe? At primary level, you have 95 pupils to a teacher. Where are the girls? Where are the boys? It means that we have a lot of people who are dropping out and not continuing their education to junior secondary school and senior secondary school. And most of these people are women. So for all of us here, right, we should be more interested, not just asking what did we have increase in budget provisions this year or last year. We should also be interested in what was released and where did it go to, who benefited, and what changed in the education system. Young leaders network engagement in this work rests on a very simple conviction that a policy is only as strong as the systems and resources available to implement it. So in this webinar today, we are seeking to build a bridge from girls' lived experience to policy, from policy to budgets, from budgets to releases, from releases to seeing improvement in our schools and communities, and from expenditure to us being able to measure improvements in girls' lives. Gender responsive education financing is where girls' rights meet resources, where policy meets implementation. So as we proceed with our keynote speakers and highly resourced panel list, I want us to open our mind and enjoy this conversation. Not only enjoy it, but also learn and take some points that we're going to be acting upon. Thank you so much for understanding. I'm sure that framing, all of us now understand the reason why we are having this conversation. To take this conversation further, I'm going to be inviting one amazing person that we love and respect so much. His name is Stanley Achonu. Stanley Achonu is the Senior Director for Nigeria at Malala Funds. He's a governance and public policy expert with over 12 years of experience leading impactful reform initiatives across Africa. He has designed and managed complex programs focused on governance, transparency, and leadership, working closely with heads of states, ministers, civil society, and multilateral organizations. His work includes extensive engagement in open government, fiscal reform, civic technology, and strategic stakeholder collaboration. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put up our digital hands as we invite Mr. Stanley Achonu to give us the keynote speech to help set the pace and direction for this webinar. Please welcome Mr. Stanley. Mr. Stanley, you're welcome. We're so excited to have you. All right, I think, Nadia, can you add Mr. Stanley to the co-host so that he can unmute himself? Beautiful. All right. Welcome.
Okay. Yes,
It's good
thank
to
you.
see you again, sir.
Yes, thank you. Happy to see you again, Sean. It was just a few days ago. We were all together here in Abuja. So happy to be delivering this keynote address. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me begin by thanking the entire Young Leaders Network team for convening this conversation and for inviting Malala Fund to be part of it. And I think this is in the spirit of partnership that we currently enjoy with the network. I'm pleased to join you today on behalf of our Chief Executive Officer, Nabila Aguele, who unfortunately is not able to present this keynote by herself. And to our government officials, development partners, civil society colleagues, education advocates, and other stakeholders joining us this afternoon. Thank you for taking out the time to join this very important conversation, if I would say. Let me begin with this single observation. Nigeria does not have such shortage of commitments to girls' education, and I want us to be clear about that. We hear these commitments very frequently. But what it does have a shortage of is financed commitment. So there is the verbal commitment, but there is the financing that verbal commitments that you have made. We have the policies, we have frameworks, we have guidelines, but what we not always have and at large, at scale, and at consistency required is the financing to turn those verbal commitments and written commitments into reality for girls, because adopting policy is only a simple part of the work, and Shaun, you already alluded to this. If a girl is unable to attend school because there is no school close enough to her community, there is no adequate sanitation, if there is no adequate sanitation facilities, or if insecurity makes the journey unsafe, or if she has left school because of marriage or pregnancy and that there is no functioning support for her in return, then policy has not yet changed her reality. And many of the decisions that determine whether it does are financing decisions. It's not just written on paper, it is money-based decisions. And this is really what I want us to focus on today. How we move from making commitments to girls in our policies to financing those commitments through our public systems. We often discuss education financing in terms of how much the government allocates to education. Of course, the size of the allocation matters, but we also need to look at what is underneath those figures that are allocated. What are we actually funding? Does the budget reflect the barriers that are keeping girls out of school? Is the money being released? Is it reaching communities for what it is intended? And are we able to see whether the spending is producing better outcome for girls? These questions are important because the scale of the challenge cannot be ignored. Over 10 million Nigerian children are out of school, and girls face additional barriers, including poverty, child marriage, adolescent pregnancy, insecurity, distance to school, inadequate wash facilities, a shortage of female teachers, and weak systems to support girls whose education has been interrupted. These are often discussed as social or cultural barriers, but they also have very practical financing implications. If distance is preventing girls from attending school, we need to think about where the schools are located, the transport and the infrastructure. If adequate sanitation is affecting attendance, wash has to be planned and budgeted for. If there are too many female teachers in if there are too few female teachers in underserved communities, recruitment, deployment, and retention have to be financed. And if a government has adopted a reentry policy for married, pregnant, and parenting girls, then the services that allow a girl to return and remain in school also need to be costed and funded. Otherwise, we risk having strong policies that the government does not have the resources or systems to implement. There's also the strong economic case for getting this right. I want to share some evidence of some work done by Accelerate Hub, an Africa-focused research partnership led by teams at the University of Oxford and the University of Cape Town. Their analysis found that investing $114 million to reach 1.1 million adolescent girls in Kano and Kaduna states through proven evidence-based programs could avert over 327,000 child marriages and 383,000 adolescent pregnancies while preventing thousands of maternal and child deaths. The projected societal returns is more than 21 to 1. Now, I have just mentioned a lot of numbers, so let me sit for a moment. That means that $21 in benefit for every dollar invested. So put that in naira terms. For every 1 million naira invested, the estimated return to society is 21 million naira. Right? That's a big number. There are very few Yes, a very big number. There are very few fiscal instruments in any government's toolkit that return that kind of value. It is one of the highest return investments available to any state or federal budget in this country. For those of us working in girls' education, the rights argument is fundamental. And by the rights, I mean rights of girls to education is fundamental. Every girl should be able to access and complete 12 years of education and make decisions about her own future. But when we are speaking to ministries of finance, budget, and planning, there's equally important fiscal argument to make. Investing in girls' education affects education outcomes, health outcomes, productivity, child marriage, maternal health, and the longer-term economic prospect of families and communities. A better educated woman is a healthier woman and for her family as well. So the question becomes, how do we make sure that public finance systems are actually directing resources towards those outcomes? This is where gender responsive education planning and budgeting becomes important. It is sometimes understood as simply creating a budget line for girls' education. That can be useful, but the approach is much broader than that. It means looking at how education priorities are identified and costed in the first place, how they enter the budget, what is eventually appropriated and what is released, and what is spent, and what the government is able to track. It also means using data to understand who is benefiting from education spending and who is still being left behind. At Malala Fund, we have been learning a great deal about this through the work of our Education Champions Network partners. And I want to give you a few examples of some of this learning that we are seeing. In Kano, for example, Bridge Connect Africa initiative worked with the state government to develop and adopt a gender responsive education budgeting framework. One of the most useful lessons from Kano is that the framework was developed within government's existing systems. The Ministry of Education, Planning, Budget, Finance, Women Affairs were involved alongside other relevant education institutions. That cross-government ownership is important because education financing is not the responsibility of Ministry of Education alone. Education might identify the need, but planning, budget, and finance institutions determine how that need moves through the public finance systems. Kano's experience also showed that the value of sustained capacity sustained capacity building. It is not enough to train officials once on gender responsive budgeting and expect institutional practice to change. Planners and budget officers need the tool, the data, and continued technical support to apply it through successive planning and budget cycles. I want to talk about another example in Oyo State. Our partner Invictus Africa is also working to strengthen gender responsive education budgeting and spending, including the accountability systems needed to understand whether resources intended to address gender gaps are actually being spent as planned. Taken together, these experiences give us useful lessons for Bauchi. In Bauchi, our partner who has convened us today, Young Leaders Network, supported the state government to develop a gender-sensitive education policy, which was formally adopted earlier this year. The policy includes important commitments to girls' education, and the state has set a target of allocating 2% of its annual education budget to gender mainstreaming, rising to 5% by 2030. The Young Leaders Network is now continuing that work with Bauchi State Government, supporting the development of a gender-responsive education financing framework, including financing for re-entry pathways for married, pregnant, and parenting girls. The next question is what that commitment looks like in reality. What will the 2% actually finance? How are the priorities selected? How are the interventions costed? And how will releases and expenditures be tracked? And how will government know whether the spending is improving girls' participation and completion in education? This is why the framework the YLN is developing has an important opportunity to go beyond setting a financing target. It can help establish the systems through which Bauchi identifies the barriers facing girls, costs the interventions required to address them, allocates resources, and tracks implementation. There are a few areas I think that are particularly important as that work moves forward. First, we need to become more specific about what we are financing. A general commitment to spend more on girls' education is difficult to implement unless the barriers are clearly identified and interventions are costed against them. The needs will also differ across states and communities. In one place, the priority may be school infrastructure. Elsewhere, it may be female teacher deployment, safety, re-entry support, or financial assistance for the poorest families. So we need to be clear about what we're asking for. The second is gender responsive planning needs to become part of the normal budget process. It shouldn't be an afterthought. If it depends on a separate project or presence of a particular advocate each year, it will always be vulnerable. If that partner is out of the picture, then the program goes into risk. The more these requirements are built into planning guidance, budget cost circular, chart of account codes, sector plans, reporting systems, the more likely they are to survive changes in personnel and political leadership. Right? So build it into the systems. It shouldn't be individual personality driven. The third that I wanted us to talk about today is also we need much visibility of what happens after a budget is approved. An allocation alone does not tell us whether a program was implemented. We need to be able to follow resources through release and expenditure, and as far as possible, connect that spending to the people and communities it was intended to serve. That also requires government to make budget and expenditure data available in a timely and accessible way. Civil society and communities cannot effectively track what they cannot see. Accountability works better when people outside government have the information they need to understand what was promised, what was released, what was spent, and ultimately what was delivered. And finally, states should be able to learn from each other. Kano should be able to share what worked and what did not. Bauchi should be able to adopt those lessons rather than start again. The same applies to the work being done in Oyo and elsewhere. At federal level, there's already encouraging momentum, and I did talk about being with Sheung last week. The National Gender Responsive Planning and Budgeting Framework has been finalized and is under review. And there is a wider commitment within the Federal Civil Service to strengthen gender responsive planning and budgeting, which was one of the conversations we were having last week at the meeting with Sheung and the Minister of State for Budget and Planning. So the opportunity is to connect the federal direction with the practical experience already emerging from the states. For Malala Fund, that is an area where we believe we and our partners can contribute. We work with local organizations across Adamawa, Bauchi, Kaduna, Kano, and Oyo, and they are already working with governments on many of these questions. They bring evidence from communities, experience of working within the state systems, and importantly, the perspective of girls whose lives these policies and budgets are intended to change. As we think about the recommendations coming out of today's discussion, I would like to encourage us to keep those girls in view, center the girls that we work for. The purpose of gender responsive education financing is not to produce a better budget document. It is to make better decisions about public resources so that a girl who would otherwise be excluded has a better chance of entering school, remaining there, learning, and completing her education. We already have evidence of what works. We have examples of states beginning to put that evidence into practice. There's a growing policy momentum at the federal level. Our task now is to connect those policies and make sure that the commitments we have made to Nigerian girls are reflected in the way we plan, budget, spend, and account for public resources. Malala Fund is pleased to continue working alongside government, Young Leaders Network, our Education Champion Network partners, and others in this room to support that work in Bauchi and across Nigeria. Thank you very much, and I look forward to joining the ongoing conversation and contributing to the solutions that we identified through this conversation. Thank you again, Sheung, and thank you everyone for listening.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Stanley Achonu. You grounded this discussion in the realities of the policy and finance implementation that is very, very practical. Your emphasis on government ownership, even measurable outcomes, right? It's really cherished. Thank you so much for bringing in this input. We're grateful. Thank you. All right, at this point, we're going to proceed into our panel discussion. And we have amazing people who are going to be speaking from their wealth of experience to some of the key issues that will guide development of gender responsive education financing at national and subnational level. Let me begin by welcoming among the panelists Dr. Kalu Aja. Dr. Kalu, it's good to have you. Dr. Kalu is a certified financial education instructor and astute professional with extensive experience in capital market operations, treasury, investment, asset management, and occupational pension service. He has over 22 years of composite experience gained over the years working with UAC of Nigeria as a brand manager, BGL Limited, where he worked on the institutional pension desk, Fidelity Bank PLC, where he headed the asset management desk for the private banking unit, and FCMB Pensions PFA, where he was part of the pioneers that set up the PFA from scratch and held the position of the COO, retired from the PFA with over 250 billion naira in assets under management. There are so many more to share about Dr. Kalu. We are so privileged to have you. You're welcome, sir. Another panelist that I also want us to welcome specially is Dr. Asana Shaibu. She is a senior program officer at ACE Charity, an organization dedicated to providing quality education for underserved children, empowering women and youths, and advocating for the right of the girl child to access free and quality education. She has a BSc in Human Anatomy, MSc in Public Health, and a PhD in Community Education and Development. Thank you so much, Dr. Asana, for joining us. The next person that I'm welcoming, that will be also adding from his wealth of experience, is Mr. Ahmad Abdullahi Ahmad. Mr. Ahmad Abdullahi Ahmad supports the design and implementation of institutional strengthening, policy delivery, and performance management engagements across education sector and public sector landscape. With over 12 years of experience in program coordination, monitoring and evaluation, operations management, stakeholders engagement, he has worked across government and development partner-funded initiatives, including the EU and the DFID funded projects. Mr. Ahmad, it's good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. We're glad that you're able to join us. I understand that some of our panelists have a lot on their tables and might want to shift to other kind of work, especially Dr. Kalu Aja. So permit me to prioritize pushing a lot of questions towards Dr. Kalu Aja, right, before he moves to join other commitments, while we continue the other conversations with Asana Shaibu and Mr. Ahmad Abdullahi. Is that okay, Asana? All right.
Yes, that's fine.
All right. Smala Ahmad, is that also good with you?
Yes.
Okay, great, great, great. So it's good. Thank
Yes,
you,
this is
Mr.
good.
Kalu, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Oh, great. Okay, so let me begin by asking you some questions. Like I shared while I was welcoming you, you are a financial analyst, public finance commentator. Your core lens is fiscal space, financing realism, revenue choices, education funds, sustainability and public finance disciplines, right? When states say there is no money, how should we test whether the issue is truly lack of money or weak prioritization, or even issue of poor releases, leakages, or inefficient spending? I think we should start the conversation from there.
Yeah, it's a fantastic conversation. Let me just first of all thank Stanley, the gentleman that spoke earlier. That was very, very rich. I think I learned a lot just listening to him, and I just thank him for the data and the throughput. So it's a great question you're asking, that how do we know when states say there is no money? How do we know? The answer is pretty simple. There is money because we see the FARC, we see the funds that are released to the states, so the money is there. I think the question is, how do we know when states say they do not want to prioritize monies going to education, and specifically education for girls? That's where really the question is. If a state gets money and the state says, I want to build a road or I want to build an airport, but I do not want to invest in female education, that is the question
that we then have to ask, why is the state saying that? And I think the answer, we have to go back to the original document and look at how monies are shared in Nigeria, which is the federal allocation arrangement, horizontal and vertical. Now, if you look at that document critically, and especially I believe it's the horizontal, where we then share monies according to, say, land mass, minimum responsibility of state, we are not incentivizing spending on education. Whatever you incentivize, that's what you're going to see in finance. So if you tell a state governor that, listen, I will give you your monies based on number one, equality of states, number two, population, number three, land mass. But I will give you health, education, all that combined will form less than 5%. Then no state government is going to allocate any funds to field education or even water as a whole. So the first question is that when you see a state governor actually spending money on education, it's because they want to, not because they have to. So if they tell there's no money for education, even if they are telling the truth, they are going according to what the DNA is asking them to do. So I think the first thing we have to do is to first of all acknowledge that, listen, we've got to really go back and then should we say is the word incentivize? That's a nice word. Incentivize the state governors to say, when we give you monies for FARC, health and human services have got to take a higher place than even infrastructure, the roads and the airports. Educating females, hospitals have to take priority before we talk about even infrastructure. That's going to be where we start from, sir.
Oh, great, sir. Incentivize education, not only at the national level, but I'm also imagining state governments doing same for local governments. That can help local government to also be committed to supporting education at the grassroots. Thank you so much for that input. Um, when we look at the tertiary education system, we see the impact of initiatives like the TED Fund. Almost every tertiary institution you go to in Nigeria, you see infrastructure development all linked to TED funds.
Mm.
Question is, can a girls' education support fund or education equity fund work at state level? If it can, what kind of safeguarding could make it credible? Are there
Mm.
places where it is working that other states can adopt from?
And just to answer, I'm not going to be, Stanley has more data, but how I'll approach this is to say, first of all, yes, it can work. In parts of Nigeria, you have the female education problem, and in some parts, you have the male education problem. I think in the north, it's more female, and in the southeast, you have a male problem where the females are going to school, but the males are not going to school. So
Yeah.
they're very, very multiple. So yes, it can work. I think the word we use is to say it is means tested and a dependency, right? We want to then say we have a class of people that left on their own cannot achieve a result. So the state or the local government's job is try to force them through the system and say, we're going to give you incentives and, should we say, inducements to allow you to catch up and then to be at the level where others are, because on your own, you cannot get there because of cultural or finance issues. So yes, there has to be a deliberate policy where we believe that female education is falling behind. We then say in those particular states, we're going to go and work with them to, the word again, incentivize. Go back to when we had Balarabe Musa, I believe, when he was governor of Kano State. He wanted to change the allocation of formula and say, let's make primary school education about 25% of sharing of fact. Imagine if we had that today. Then there's an incentive for state governors to first of all enroll Nigerian students into primary school. And when you do that sort of enrollment of 25%, surely females are going to be in that catchment area. So yes, there should be a deliberate policy to say we want to include females. And number two, you've got to then do a means testing to say we're going to incentivize you according to where you are falling behind, which is female enrollment in those states that have female gaps in their education enrollment. That's what needs to happen. The issue you spoke about TET funds, sir, again, very important. We're taking TET fund from the primary to university. Big mistake. The federal government across the world and state governments focus more on the primary and secondary, not the university, the building blocks. So taking it because of ASU strikes to TET fund, I believe in my view, is Big mistake. It should come back to focus on the primary, the building blocks first. The universities can always get money from the donors and the private sector if they can, but the other guys cannot. So yeah.
Wow.
Sorry, Sean,
All
if you
right,
don't mind,
please go ahead.
and there's a valid point that Dr. Aja has made here that I want to emphasize, which is the incentive that he referred to. And there's one popular incentive that Nigerians have practically abused, which is the conditional cash transfer. In places where government has attempted to incentivize education or access to health, they have attached condition to it. They've said on a monthly basis, I'll give you 5,000 naira. In return, you bring your kids to school or you take yourself to the hospital for checks. Here, they have implemented conditional cash transfer without the conditions, right? So incentives options are available. It is then how we are deploying it. And I just wanted to emphasize the point that he was making about incentivizing it. The tools are available. We have attempted them, but as usual, we have used the half measure approach to it.
Oh, that's lovely. I also understand that in the UBEC counterpart fund sharing structure, there are certain incentives that are also dedicated to support low education outcome states. This is lovely. Thank you for bringing that up. Dr. Kalu, when you share that this is possible at the state level, I'm just wondering the kind of workable ideas that state governments can utilize to be able to accumulate financing or funds to support gender responsive education.
Mm.
From your numerous years of experience, you've worked at different institutions, you've advised governments on different fiscal planning, fiscal priority decisions that they should make. If I want to ask you, how can the Nigerian states realistically create fiscal space for girls' education without straining their budget or what I would call their limited budget? What other ideas is available for them to generate resources? That I'm sure that a lot of times we have revenues that are wasted away in the country.
Yeah, I think there are going to be two ways. And unfortunately, I have to disappoint you. We have to strain the resources. But there are two ways we have to do this. Number one is to bring the private sector in. The Nigerian Constitution says that the primary schools are the functions of the local government. So it's not a federal thing. The local and state governments should take care of primary schools, especially, and I believe also secondary schools. We have in the Constitution free education is not justiciable. It's not, they say, lawyers say it's not enforceable. Good. But we have to do what's called on the fiscal side for the government, a first charge. To then say whatever happens, there will be a percentage earmarked for education. And in that earmark for education, there will be a percentage earmarked for female education. It has to be an earmark, which means that every budget cycle, you do 5 or 10 or whatever or just by the whims and caprices of the budget folks, education will not get funded. We've seen it in the federal and the state because education is not visible. It's not something that if you cut down on spending for education, many people don't see it. But roads, it's visible. And in Nigeria, we like visible governance. So we do the airports and the roads because that wins you election in 4 years than to fund schools in the rural areas away from social media. So you've got to say, okay, we want to first of all have a percentage that is done at earmark percentage by law, first charge. It has to go here to a commission and then they are able to fund. Once you can put that in place, that gives you a seed funding that you can then go to the private sector and say, hey, private sector, we can put 1 million if you bring in 2 million and we'll take it off your taxes. You have private sector companies in your state, they charge you payee. Okay, can you, the same thing we do right now, if you invest in education, take it out of your pay, and we'll also seed fund you with what we have already allocated. The federal government has a fund, the name always escapes me, where the federal and the state fund education, but the states have got to do a counterpart funding. Many states have not done counterpart
That's the
funding.
UBEC matching grants.
You beg idea, exactly. Do the exact same thing at the state level. Don't reinvent the wheel. The same at the local and state level. To say we're going to do a first line charge, we create into a fund, and that fund then does matching grants. If you have a donation to make, donate is tax. You can get tax breaks if you make that donation, i.e., because states collect payee. I don't know about VAT, how that would work, but if you just focus on payee, tenement rates, and all that, and say you are able to fund education and we'll give you a credit for taxes, which you can sell and all that. So if I'm doing this in the States, I can put 1 million in, get a tax credit. I can sell it to a business that is doing that is in that state. Those are, again, nothing new. Tried and tested, have worked, and we should adopt them and utilize them. It's money. So federal money comes in, mark a percentage out into a seed fund, then use that seed fund to attract more grants, more donations, and more, should we say, private sector funding from folks outside the government. So you create a larger snowball effect of 1 naira becoming 2 naira, that becomes 4 naira. That's really how to do it. You have to show sacrifice before you can demand sacrifice from the private sector.
Wow, this is amazing. As we're sharing on this, I'm just remembering what happened in Oyo State when Oyo set up the Oyo Education Trust Fund, where
Mhm.
6% of VAT that are being collected in the state are channeled into the funds. There's also 1% contribution from private institutions within the school, within the state. I also learned that for every contract awarded to contractors within the state, a certain percentage are also deducted to fund the
Correct.
education. Like you said, education should be prioritized even by the private sectors who require quality human capital to also function. So they must have some level of contribution to the education of people. At this point, I will want to uh, ease Mr. Kalu Aja now
Thank you so
so
much.
that we can also bring in some of our panelists. But sincerely, Dr. Kalu, we appreciate your time. I know how tight your schedules have been. I also understand how much you have to accommodate my disturbance.
Not a
Thank you
problem.
so
It's a
much.
great discussion. I'll just listening, but I really appreciate you guys doing this.
Thank
And
you
let me
so
know
much.
how I can share the conversation as well. That would be fantastic.
Oh, great. I will love that. I think after now, we'll be coming up with some memos to share.
Okay.
Even on this call, I've seen representatives, senior directors in the Ministry of Education in Bauchi State. After now, Bauchi is, yeah, I can see a hand, Dr. Sada, to thank you. We are expecting Bauchi State to develop the education financing framework, and we expect that to be innovative and also be something practicable. We would love at the end of the day if we can share such draft with you for you to critique in your own free time.
That is fine. All right.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.
Thank you
I'll
so
tell you.
much. All right. I
Okay.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Can we appreciate Dr. Kala, everyone? Yes, with our digital hands. Thank you, Asana, for staying on the conversation. Thank you, Stanley. Thank you, Ahmad. Please, you're welcome back to the panel conversation, Mr. Ahmad. Um, thank you for your patience. We needed to make that happen so that we can accommodate all that we planned to. Are you okay? Are you back, Dr. Mala Ahmad? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay,
Thank
great.
you, Sam.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
So, yes, I can hear you very well. Let me start with you, Mr. Ahmad.
All right.
Um, why do strong education policies sometimes fail at the implementation stage? What institutional manage arrangements sometimes is really required to connect gender-responsive policy commitments to planning, budget, procurement, releases, and performance review? Do you get that, sir?
Uh, no, you can actually repeat that again. Let me take
Okay,
some
okay,
notes.
beautiful. So I'm just asking that why do strong education policies sometimes fail? We've seen, like Mr. Stanley said, Nigeria have adequate policy infrastructures to deliver quality education, inclusive education. So, but we often see that the returns
Yes.
are usually poor. So I'm interested in knowing why do this kind of why do generally strong policies fail in Nigeria? Are there institutional arrangements that are required, especially on the matter of gender responsive policy commitments? Are there some institutional arrangements that are required to make them a reality?
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Sheun. My name is Ahmed. You already mentioned it, and I'm the program coordinator at System Strategy and Policy Lab. I'm so glad to be here, honestly, because I'm representing my founder, Dr. Murtala Adogi Mohammed, who is happened to be actually occupied in another engagement. And I'm so glad from the discussions that is going on that this is something that we've been working on since we are also part of the Malala. In one way, that was last year. We actually implemented the state of girls' education financing across 10 states. We also developed some advocacy tool that actually, keep us informed about all this data in regards to, gender related financing in girls' higher education. So the questions like you asked, honestly, is something that is quite very interesting. And like you mentioned, why do strong policies fail? I think in most cases, if you look at the commitments of the government from, not because they are poorly written, but because the system required to implement them are weak or missing entirely. The gap between policy adoption and the policy implementation is where good intention, usually die. I'm sure you agree with that. So the core issue, for example, to say poor release, for example, like in Bauchi State, quite some number of the budgeted amount that was, meant for capital budget, was released in 2024. I think quite all right. Then also you see that, for example, the administrative overheads, over 60% of education expenditure go to admin instead of, identifying what are the right tools that actually need to be in place. For example, what are the infrastructure that need to be in schools so that it will ensure that girls have access to, safe, conducive environment. So also the on tag, for example, on tag budget lines, which cannot be tracked. Also, if you look at the institutional capacity gap, like I mentioned, there is a lot of weak coordination. Different fragmented committee with overlapping mandates. So these are the reason why some of these, strong policies fail, because there is no commitment between the government, and there is no well coordinated, and there is no capacity of the institution to implement them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I thank you for that. The institutions most times are weak, probably because of finances or even the capacities, like you mentioned earlier. Thank you. Now, well done for your work around education programming. From your
Thank you.
experience in education programming and community level interventions, which barriers facing girls are most frequently recognized in policies, but they remain inadequately financed? Do you get it? So what are those barriers girls face that is always captured in policies, but when you come to budgeting, they are not captured?
Thank you for that question. So I'll say one very important barrier that we are currently working on, and that is child marriage. One of the most important barriers and challenges that affect girls is child marriage, and this is widely known. Most policies address this. They understand that this is an issue. However, efforts, maybe when you look at the budgets, what will be there if there is a budget line at all to address it will probably be community sensitization. The married adolescents, adolescents who have gotten married are often neglected, and there is no allocation to address married adolescents re-entry. So re-entry is something that we're talking about now, but just the fact that for so many years, girls have been getting married and there is no dedicated budget line addressing girls who are already married and ensuring that they can complete their education. That's a huge blind spot, right, that we've noticed. Another thing I'll say is one very common thing, and this arose because of interventions of NGOs, wash facilities. Wash facilities is often highlighted in policies. However, when you go to schools, you still see that there are no wash facilities, or the wash facilities are not gender disaggregated. That means we understand the problem, but the funds to actually address the problem are
Address
either
the
not
problem.
budgeted for, or not released, or not spent. We also have the issue of female teachers, right? We know that data has shown, we know policies address that female teachers um, improve girls' participation in schools and they improve enrollment, especially in rural areas. However, funding for female teacher deployment in rural areas is often missing. We might have
Yeah.
we might have recruitment of teachers, we might have recruitment of female teachers, but if the female teachers are recruited and they are concentrated in the urban centers, then and there is no funding for incentives for rural posting, for example, then we're just wasting our time because it means that the girls who are disadvantaged and who really need female teachers, who really need to see these role models in schools, are actually not, seeing this, and then we are having poor education outcomes. So these are some of the issues. We also have menstrual hygiene management. We always talk about menstrual hygiene management. There's always all policies will address menstrual hygiene management. But which school would you go to that has pad banks? You hardly see any budgets that includes pad banks or menstrual or disposal bins, for example, in schools. So these are areas that we've been talking about. We've talked about insecurity, safe schools, and girls have frequently spoken about insecurity. Policies are aware that insecurity is an issue that affects girls and boys, but affects girls differently. However, they're still seeing that these things are not budgeted for. So, yeah, I think these are just some of the major issues that
All
affect
right.
girls. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Asana. Very, very loud. Issues around, yeah, female teachers. I was going to check in one of the census reports of our state, and you could see a lot of data that are a bit disturbing. For instance, pupil teacher ratio in public primary is 123 to 1, right? In public GSS, you find 33.7 to 1. In senior secondary, you find 44 to 1. So we're not even talking about qualified teacher yet. So we already
Exactly.
have a pupil teacher
Teacher
deficit.
shortage,
How much
yes.
more talking about the female teachers? So yeah, of course, we know that female teachers. Okay, so I think I have a data here on female teachers. So the shares of female teachers, right, in public primary is 33%, at public GSS, right, is 24%, and public SSS is 24%. So the shares of teachers, right, of female teachers to general teachers is just about 1/4. And
Yeah.
we understand that from the enrollment data we're seeing, the enrollment of female students is almost half or even more in some places that of men. So we have in some places more female children in school than even boys, right?
Yeah.
Yet, these students are always interfacing with male teachers. So
Yeah.
that's another gap. I love that. Let me
Yeah.
come to Mr. Ahmad. Mr. Ahmad, back to issues around institutions, right? What institutional arrangement should the state put in place so that a gender responsive education financing framework does not become another document on the shelf? You go to a lot of places, documents are on the shelf. Oh, do you have this policy? Yeah, we have it. This is it. But beyond the policy document on the shelf, we want them to be implemented. If any state is to implement them, what institutional arrangement should they put in place, especially the policy on gender responsive education?
Okay. So you are talking about some of the institutional arrangement that the state should actually
Should
can
put
put
in
in
place,
place
yes,
to ensure
exactly.
that you know, yes. All right. Well, you remember, like I said, we actually did the some of the advocacy too. I think part of it actually we mentioned some of the gender responsive education finance that avoid becoming shelf documents. We try as much as possible also to ensure that we capture some of the tools and guidance that actually can help the state ministries of education, the state commissioners. So educatics, for example, now, there is need to have this steering committee at the highest level. For example, a dedicated steering committee chaired by the Commissioner for Education, whereby the leadership can be somehow ensure political ownership and authority, because at times we actually forget to carry them along in terms of designing and also bringing all the stakeholders. For example, the SBMC, the MS officers. So these are some of the challenges when government are putting policies in place, and at the end of the day, because it doesn't carry the voice of all the stakeholders, so you only see that it doesn't make any sense for them to say, oh, we are actually taking the ownership because we are not involved. So that is some of the reasons why by you see that a lot of policies document were actually just left on the shelf, because these stakeholders, even the community leaders, the traditional institutions, were not actually involved along the process to understand the real need of what they need to see in these policies, and when the implementation comes, so actually it will be impacted to the reality of what is happening.
Oh, great, great. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're enjoying the conversation. You can engage on the WhatsApp group, WhatsApp chat. I say WhatsApp chat on the Zoom chat. We have some of our community managers trying to address some of the information or questions that you may have. All right, so I want to bring in someone quickly, and is one of us in the Education Champions Network. And like Stanley mentioned earlier, they spearheaded the work around Kano State Gender Responsive Education budgeting. That's the person of Mr. Sani Mohammed. Sani is the Executive Director of Bridge Connect. Bridge Connect, you're welcome, Mr. Sani.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you for having me.
Oh, great. It's good to have you. We're excited to have you around.
Okay.
Quickly, Mr. Sani,
Yeah.
from your work in Kano State, what practical lessons, right, can help other government institutions, right, to institutionalize and sustainably finance gender responsive education?
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Sharon, and for the opportunity to share these reflections from British Connect Africa Initiative work on GREB in Kano State. Our experience overall really just began with a simple recognition that improving girls' education requires more than increasing the education budget, right? We've seen in Kano many times we are above the budget for education, but it requires also government to understand where the gender gaps exist, then direct resources towards those gaps and track whether those resources are ultimately improving the outcomes for girls. So for us, GREB wasn't about like creating a separate budget for girls or putting an additional line item because like we didn't also want it to come off as a donor-driven program, right? So for us and the Kano State government, it's a governance tool that should help them make the existing education budgets more equitable, targeted, and accountable for girls, right? So I initially came here trying to share 3 lessons from Kano, but Mr. Talia Chono and I think across all of the speakers, they've mentioned and spoken strongly really about the first lesson we should all know, which is the government ownership must be built from the beginning, right? When you're developing the framework, central to Kano's experience was taking all of them along from the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Budget and Planning, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Women Affairs, and there are sub-agencies and department and agencies that work around this issue. We ensured we involved them from the start but also made sure it fed into, for example, the teacher development policy, the gender policy in the state, and all of these other social inclusion policies that the state has already developed to really make education move in the state. I want to focus on 2.
Hold on, Sunny. Let me just pause you at that point and just check with you.
Okay.
So you spoke about securing government ownership.
Yeah.
Can you share with us what were the biggest challenge you experienced in securing that government ownership or even implementation? And what can other states, right, that are thinking of doing something like that, what can they learn or what can they pick up?
Yeah. I think for me, so, and sorry to the government people who are on the call, right? Sometimes some government people can really just be serious barriers. And this could be, for example, say you want to meet the commissioner to pitch some of these ideas or the PAMSEC, and then you have someone who is standing as the focal person maybe for that work, and the person doesn't want the work to move at all, or doesn't want anything to go to any of those superiors without them. And even when you try to like package everything to ensure that they're able to take this information to these senior people at the ministry who can then make decisions on these issues, they simply don't want it to move because it's a donor-funded program. And that cycle of coming back and delaying, like in Kano, there was someone that delayed us for something that we should have just gotten easily passed, delayed us for more than 9 months. And when we finally met, I met the commissioner. I got a friend, please just introduce me directly to the commissioner. I went to the commissioner. I was like, I've not even heard of this framework that you're talking about, right? So, but when he heard about it, he took it very personally. He called the permanent secretary. They ran with it, and within 3 months of all of those, all of the key engagements we needed to happen because he said this is what we need. So if you're not able to identify champions early and ensure that they also buy into that vision in the way you want to, you're going to have issues speaking through the bureaucracy across the ministry. So the bureaucracy is real.
Okay, great. Thank you. The conversation is getting more interesting and I want to bring in more people.
Yeah.
So I want to bring in Ajia Saadatu Osman. And I also want to bring in Mr. Caleb Toba Akamu of Invictus Africa, briefly to also learn from their experiences of their work. So let me start with Ajasa. Mr. Sani just mentioned some of the challenges to getting government buy-in. In this call today, we have people from civil society organizations from different places. From your experience as director donor coordination, what are the best approaches that civil society organizations can take, right, to ensure that they easily secure government buy-in from the beginning and end of every policy introduction? Sani, don't go far. I'm still coming back to you. Yes, Ajasa, are you there? Kindly unmute, ma. We'd love to hear from you. All right.
Yes, I am. Good afternoon,
Yes,
everyone.
we can hear you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Please, sorry. I didn't know I'm going to contribute. I will appreciate if you please repeat the question you asked. I was busy eating. I was listening when I was eating, but I have to
All
close
right.
my just to.
That's fine. It's all right, ma. So I'm saying that from the experience Sunny shared from their work in Kano, how sometimes getting government buy-in can be very difficult, probably because of the bureaucracies or even dealing with some very difficult government officials, all of those things. But from your experience relating and engaging with donor agencies, donor, even civil society organizations and the government, what are the most important strategies that any civil society organization can take to easily get government buy-in in their policies and programs?
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Shegun. Well, to start with, it all depends because when we said government buy-in, it depends. Were they able to meet the government? Were they able to follow the right channel? Because there are different entry points. Some civil society, or let me say NGOs, do just make arrangement of what they think they will do for the state instead of maybe coming together, discussing, following the right channel. Because if you are to follow, you know how you are doing in Bauchi. If you are to follow the right channel, the appropriate quarter, you are not the one that's supposed to take the matter, maybe let me say to the government. We have protocols, we have offices that we have to, it is the work of those in charge of the particular offices that you're supposed to meet with. Then together you can make, they will, they can intimate the, please, sorry, I'm in a meeting and I'm on mute. No, okay, thank you so much. So please, sorry, don't mind the background. I am in
No,
the
no
office
problem.
and there is in and out inside, please, sorry. So
No
in as
problem.
much as you're going to follow the appropriate quarters, I'm pretty sure you're going to achieve what you intend to achieve, because there are instances that you will see maybe sometimes, just like what Sani said, there was a time they went, I don't know whether it's Sani that said it, there was a time they went, they were discussing about a particular policy and the commissioner said he's not even aware of it. Of course, there is every possibility that he's not going to be aware of it, because in as much as you did not meet the right person or you did not follow the right appropriate channel, that would definitely take the information, coordinate the progress and the procedure of the policy, you're just on your own. Because sometimes there are some officers that can, maybe you can meet some officers that they are not the actual people that are supposed to take up the matter. Then they can just, it's just a matter of maybe attending the policy, doing the policy, and maybe you will just hear the policy, there is also policy. But we have policies, we have department, we have unit that is mainly for policy. We have the planning department that are responsible for carrying up all this matter, and also the permanent secretary, the commissioner. We cannot just do things on our own without informing the management, getting approval from the management. In as much as the rightful is going to be done, then definitely we are going to achieve. But in the cases whereby you said you have difficulty in government buy-in, then definitely there is tendency the right channel, the appropriate channel that's supposed to be followed is not being followed.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Ajasa. I also saw a chat from Man Abdulrahman. I guess that is the UNICEF education manager for Northeast. All right. He says he needs to leave. However, I would have wanted to stay, I wanted him to respond to something. Uh, but this matter is critical, Ajasa, and another person can come in. This a major challenge that people face. It's engaging government is sometimes diverting interest, right, from both government side and the civil society organizations. We understand that in financing gender education, there's need for proper coordination, especially among not just from the government side, even among donor agencies, to ensure that all donor interventions are aligning to a general plan. But in most cases, this is where the conflict happens. Conflict comes this way. Maybe and social NGO got a grant to support in this kind of intervention within the state. Behold, you go to the state government and state government tells you, no, for us, this is not what we want. Meanwhile, what the others are intervening are also very relevant issue, right? So, how do we align these kind of things? I think this is a conversation that we must get to know, because I believe that if we pull together the resources that are being you brought in from World Bank, from UNICEF, and the different international organizations for Malala funds, and we look at education interventions in the last 20 years, we should have made much more progress, right? But due to problem of coordination and other things, we are struggling. So there's need to begin to look at this critically. Let me go to Asana quickly to ask you this question. Are we still together, Asana?
Yes, yes, we are.
Okay, beautiful. So there's another challenge we've noticed, and that challenge is that we talk about financing girls' education or planning gender responsive education budgeting, but girls themselves are not carried along. Let me ask you, how can we make girls' voice part of budget accountability so that they are not only counted as beneficiaries or treated as people who can define what should be financed, but rather their voices, they're able to make like have a voice in determining what should be funded for them and how the funds should be made available.
Okay. Before I answer your question, I just want to note a comment that was mentioned regarding one of the issues that are often excluded from budgets, and that is GBV. GBV is actually an issue that is highlighted. I think it's someone from
Oh.
Sakefa that mentioned it. However, you won't even see any budget line on GBV reporting mechanisms or counselors in schools. Those things are actually missing. So just wanted to add that. And thank you for that comment. Okay, so
Okay.
regarding girls, I want to just give an example on the work that we are doing. One of the work that we're doing is on re-entry for education, and we're speaking with the government stakeholders, and we mentioned that when it comes to centers for married girls or married women, they already have centers for married women. Married women can access education, so they don't really see the need, for this particular issue. They don't see why we are talking about married adolescents, because this is something that has already been resolved, right? And so during our workshop, we actually invited married adolescents to come to that workshop and speak for themselves. And they said, yes, we know that they are married women's centers, but those are married women, 30 years, 40 years old. Those centers are filled with 30-year-old women, 40-year-old women. They mentioned that these centers have they know people who have been in these centers for the past 10 years and have learned not a thing. They said they are adolescent girls. They want to learn with their peers. They don't fit in these centers that are for married women, because we forget that just because they are married, they are still girls. They are still adolescents. So it was
Yeah.
in listening to the girls and hearing this specific concern that they actually stopped arguing with us and saying, "Oh, okay, we actually need classes for these girls." In short, they questioned the girls. They said, "Okay, but where do you live? There's one center there." They said, "Yes, we know the center, but they are only teaching literacy, and we dropped out of school in SS2. The center cannot cater to us because literacy is not what we need. It's not our educational need. We want to learn science, we want to learn physics, we want to learn biology." So this was a situation where we're able to bring stakeholders in the same room with these girls, and the girls were able to talk about issues that affect them, which as adults or as a different group of people, we are often blind to, because it's not issue that affects us directly. So this is just, an example of involving girls in these conversations before the budget is being developed. When the government is carrying out its needs assessment or trying to collect data in order to inform the budget that will be developed, the girls should be consulted, whether it's in schools, out of school
Yeah.
girls, girls with
Yeah.
disabilities, different girls with different issues need to be consulted, and then their issues needs to be heard. This way, you actually learn what is the root cause of the situation, and then you can budget for that root cause, right? There's this example that Mr. Murtala actually from Systems and Policy Lab always gives of a community where they had a high rate of teenage pregnancy. And if they had just done a data assessment, maybe just a basic data assessment, just speaking to the girls, they would have said, okay, we have a high rate of this, teenage pregnancy. Let's budget for comprehensive sexuality education. But actually, one of the issues was the girls to transport themselves to school. were being helped by bike men or Okada men.
Mm.
And these Okada men, in return for, taking these girls to school, they were,
To school.
asking for sexual favors. This was the reason why there was teenage pregnancy. If the girls are not consulted, these reasons will not be, identified, and then the budget
Yeah.
will not inform these reasons. So one, before that, you need to involve the girls and listen to their concerns. And those concerns need to be documented and included in the budget. During the budgeting process itself, you can include some you can ensure that there's youth participation, ensure that mothers groups, SBMCs, CBMCs, you can actually empower married adolescents to be part of this process, right? Make it simple. See, it is money. Like money is not as what will I say, complicated as we think, right? They know how to budget. They understand that there's a problem. This is what we should do. They can actually be trained to be involved in that budgeting
Yeah.
process. After that, after the budget has been developed, then how do we ensure that it is transparent and accountable? And Mr. Stanley already talked about that. But then how do we also simplify it for the layman to understand? There can be
Yeah.
simplified scorecards, for example, that you can have girls and adolescent girls use, and they can be reporting systems to say, oh,
Mm.
there is no teacher in our school. I think Bridge Connect is doing something in Kano where they are trying to work on reporting systems from the community, right? So where the people in the community themselves, including girls, are trained to report, and there is a system that is accessible for them to report if there are no classrooms, if there is no furniture, if the toilet is no more working, if the water that was installed last 2 years has stopped running, if there are no teachers, they can actually report these issues,
Yeah.
and then these issues can now be addressed in the next budgeting cycle. So yeah,
Oh,
these are just to cut myself short. These are some of the ways we can involve girls.
okay, great, great. Thank you for this input. Very, very rich.
Thank
Before I come to Mala Ahmad, let me go to Mr. Toba. Mr. Toba, are you there? Yes. Do I help me unmute Mr. Toba? Okay, beautiful. Yes, Mr. Caleb, good to see you. And hi, Invictus Africa.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
yeah,
fine.
good. It's good to see the work you guys did in your state in
Yeah,
respect to the GREPS, Gender Responsive Education Budgeting. I want
thank
to ask you from your experience, right? If any group is reviewing a state education budget, right?
yeah.
What specific lines or spending areas should they examine to know whether the budget responds to girls' realities? I also, after you're done, I also want to hear your perspective on this same question, Mr. Ahmad.
Okay.
Please go ahead, Mr. Toba.
Thank you very much for that question. So, when this particular question you had, someone had also asked me before, but it's like a broader question. And when we are talking about gender responsive education budgeting, we need to be more specific with specificity. And in order for us to be more specific with specificity of our budget lines, there is high importance on needs assessment. So it is the needs assessment that a state conducts in education that will let you know what your budget lines will be. And also, you also need to know that when we are talking about these needs assessment, it gives us more information for us to know the status of what our budget will be for a particular year. Note that budget is not static. Budget is something that changes. So the reality for this year is surely different from the reality for next year. Let me give you drawing a practical example from our work in Oyo and Gombe. And just like I said before, we conducted an assessment between 2022 and 2025. And even before we conducted that assessment, we also conducted baseline assessment to know the reality that plays out in each state. For instance, in Gombe State, they have more boys in school than girls. In Oyo State, they have more girls in school than boys. Do you understand now? So when we now conducted our assessment of their budget lines, we discovered, number one, that their budget lines are static and there is a more of should I say replication. So that means that what they say, what they budget for this year is the same thing they will budget for next year. So the problem now is not just about the budget lines. So if the budget lines are saying that, okay, we need to build classrooms or we need to build schools, do you understand now? So if you check such now, you will say, oh, okay, their budget lines are saying that they will build schools. But the problem now is what type of school building do you want to have? Does the school building, will it include toilets, separate toilets for boys and separate toilets for girls? But you can't know all those if you have not conducted your needs assessment. So that is why the question to what should our budget lines or how specific should it be to address the needs of the girls will not be answered if we have not gotten the answer from our needs assessment. What is our needs assessment? What is it saying? Is it saying, and you also need to know the dynamic about the budget nature. You know, if the needs assessment is saying that we need, I mean, the needs of the boys are more than that of the girls, indirectly, we are also taking care of the needs of the girls.
Yeah.
Because a girl, if you are not taking care of the boys and you are focusing on just the girls, by the time that boy comes up or grows up to, we still go back to hunt the girl. So that is why the nature of the budget lines are dynamic and also are dependent on the needs assessment that is being conducted in the state. And that is why our framework that is being adopted by Oyo State. And you know, the other time when you were talking, I quickly said that I wanted to talk when you were saying that how do we institutionalize policies to ensure that the government adopts it and it is not just another policy that will be staying in the shelf. You know, for NGOs, there is a technique that we ought to adopt and follow with that. Many of the policies that NGOs do, the truth is, in many cases, governments do not use them. And why? Because most times we do not carry them along in working on the policy. So
from the
if you
beginning.
want, yes, from the beginning, if you want government to institutionalize and activate or make use of any policy you are working on, number one, you need to conduct your research and make data available to the government. And
Right.
when you show to the
I will have to
government,
force you short. Yeah, please, you got off your thoughts.
okay, so when you show to the government what the data is saying, then you need to also let them know that you need to work together on how to make available a new policy that they need to work with. And the last thing to raise, I mean to conclude, even when you work together with them to make available a policy, you still need also to do what we call maybe mentoring or about, so that you monitor them as they are implementing and also be available for them to guide them on what to do.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah,
Thank you.
very important. We help provide the data and also support through the implementation process. Thank you for that, Mr. Toba. We're supposed to round up this webinar in the next 15 minutes, so we only have 15 minutes left. So I will be cutting short our presentations as much as possible. Is that okay? So let me hear from you, Mr. Ahmad, on the same thought. What should be the specific budget lines that any state should consider if they want to make their budget gender responsive? Are you there, Mr. Ahmad? Okay, I guess maybe something is up, but I saw your hand up as earlier, Asana.
Yes, my hand was
Please
up.
go
I
go
wanted to
ahead.
add something to what Toba was saying. So Toba's point is basically that, there's no one size fits all. Yes, that's the line. So basically, a state can have there's no budget that you just automatically say is gender responsive. It depends on the barriers faced by girls in those states, girls and boys in those states, and ensuring that the budget addresses those barriers faced by girls and boys. So, for
Mhm.
example, in a state now, there are states that, for example, they have issues of high teenage pregnancy, but they don't have issues of child marriage, right? So in that their budget, you expect to see something that will add budget lines that will address the high teenage pregnancy rates in the states. In a state that has both issues of child marriage and teenage pregnancy, if this budget is only addressing child marriage but not addressing teenage pregnancy, then it is not as gender responsive as it should be, right? So there are generalized budget lines that when you look at the budget, you can identify and say, okay, this can be gender responsive. But if it is not backed by data showing the barriers actually faced by the states, then that means it might just be superficial, or it might just be there for being, gender sensitive, but might not actually respond to what the girls are facing. So I wanted to just add something with regards to if a CSO wants to actually review a budget, what should they look for? Overall budget, right? You want to ensure that the agenda responsive budget lines that are responding to that data backed, right? You want to do that. You want to ensure that you're not just seeing budget lines like community sensitization,
Mhm.
training. Because sometimes I've seen a budget where there was just a budget line with girls' education. That was the budget line. And for them, they are gender responsive because they included a line for girls' education. But that doesn't really say anything. That is just, it doesn't say anything. It doesn't solve any problem. I've seen a budget line that says transforming the lives of married adolescents. What does that actually mean? It's not specific enough. So while we are reviewing the budgets to ensure that there are budget lines that address issues, those issues are highlighted in my first question. We also have to review the budget lines itself. So there's this model, I'll say, ensuring that the budget line is smart. So first, that budget line itself, is it specific? It
Mhm.
might be too broad. It might, just like I said, girl child education is not specific enough. You're looking at that budget line. You don't know what it's actually budgeted for. And that leads to the next question. Is it measurable? So you have a budget line, but it's not linked to any indicator. For example, a budget line should be linked to an indicator. It should state that we want to build 150 classes in social communities. That way, we can actually track that budget because it is measurable, and you can actually know if the outcome was actually achieved. Then the third is it actually achievable?
Mhm.
Because sometimes they might just put superfluous budget lines. For example, construct 500 schools. Can that
Mhm.
actually be done in 1 year? Are they just putting those budget lines to make it seem like, oh, we are really doing something? But maybe that's not actually being done. Then the R is it realistically resourced? Now, this means that the funding that has been paid for that particular deadline, is it actually enough to solve the problem? For
Mhm.
example, you might see a budget line on recruit teachers, for example, but then the amount there is too small to solve the issue. So
Yeah.
then you know that they are just putting that budget line. Let's just put one budget line and just put an amount, right? And it's not actually reflecting the issue, or it might not actually solve the problem. That's just a waste of time. And then obviously it should be time bound, means that okay, this budget is for 2027. This is what will be released quarterly or annually. And so you're able to at least assess the specific gender responsive budget lines if they are gender responsive budget lines. And then you can now go to tracking whether the budget was actually released, whether it was actually executed. one thing that we end up doing, sorry, I'll soon be done. One thing
All
we
right.
do, one thing we do a lot is we applaud budgets, budget allocations. However, there might not be releases. I know a state, I know an agency, a department that they've not had release throughout the year. So they've not done anything this year. But that state is lauded as a state with high allocation. And there are states that are lauded as states with high allocation, but a high percentage is going to tertiary education and not basic or secondary education. So these are things that CSOs can actually track. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, Asana, for that. Because we need to round off the conversation right now, I just want to ask every one of you um, a question, and I want you to respond within the next 60 to 90 seconds only, including Sani. I also saw the Sakefa State Chairman, Mala Ahmad. I have this question from all of you. Are you there, Mr. Ahmad? Let me begin with you.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry. I'm back.
Beautiful, thank you. So, Mr. Ahmad and Asana and Mr. Nicholas, if you could recommend one immediate reform that the federal or state government should implement before the next education budget is approved, what would it be? One reform that I think federal and state government should implement before the next budget, annual budget is approved. What would it be for education?
Okay. Thank you very much for this. Well, for me, I'm not quite conversant with. I'm more into programs, but anything that has to do with seeing the state governors putting in any reform has to do with integrating the gender embed the gender responsive budgeting and also gender markers, for example GBB markers, into the annual budget call cycle. I'm sure with that it will ensure that the MDAs receive the same guidance on guiding gender focused allocations. Also by including, for example, ensuring that gender responsive education financing project, they are also included in the medium-term expenditure framework, because with that, it will keep reminding them that, okay, it's important to make sure that this issue of, gender responsive financing is included, and all MDAs, especially at the education's level, they were all aware of, they are conversant with it. They are also aware of it. So I think that is important.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me hear from you, Asana.
It's very hard because there's just so much that needs to be done. But I'll just say what I think should be done now. Now, I think one of the things is to actually build institutional capacity, so that we actually get our budget right. Toba was mentioning needs assessment. So the budget officers need to actually understand how to carry out this needs assessment, how to use the data from the needs assessment to actually drive the development of their budget, so that they actually can get the budget right. If we get the budget right, then the next step will now be ensuring that the budget is actually released. One of the issues that we hear or have heard from Ministry of Budget and Planning is that budget officers in these ministries sometimes do not even have the capacity, one, to develop the budget. That is why they keep repeating what has been done last year. It's easy, it's convenient. Two, the memos for release of this budget. So when they send the memos, it keeps getting rejected, and then they won't get any funding. So if you can build the capacity, like truly build the capacity, so that they can align it with needs and with policies, then I think it will be one important
That
step.
would be very, very powerful to build institutional capacity strengthening. Thank you. Sani, let's hear from you. What is that reform before the next budget is approved?
So for me, thank you, Sean. For me, it would be that we should like legalize the adoption of gender responsive financing in how even like from states down to local governments. Like, and I know, yes, we talk about the federal government, but those who are really responsible for the kind of education we want are the state governments. So we must ensure that we are providing the enabling, how do I put it? Kind of the enabling frameworks and guidance for states to be able to take down these federal level policies down to states and down to local governments.
Yeah.
And just for example, like even like with UBEC and how they formed SUBEB and all of that is a successful model as to how from the federal level things can work. But like with Child Rights Act, where we have child marriage, we say at the federal level, we have the act, people should not be getting married, there's an age of consent. If we have that federal level push at state level, I think a lot of these girls staying in school, addressing issues around child marriage and ensuring that we have the budget to support all of that, I think would be great. For me, it would be huge for states to criminalize child marriage and not just allow it to be the culture of the people who should influence whether girls should go to school or be in marriages.
All right. Thank you so much. Sacrifice Chairman, are you there, Mr. Nicholas? Thank you, Sunny. All right. Okay, so let me allow Adjessa to tell us, is Bauchi State ready as we round up this webinar for the education, gender responsive education financing framework? Adjessa, that are you there? Maybe your closing thought on this matter. All right, let me assume she's all right.
No, I'm here,
Okay,
Sean.
beautiful. All right, ma'am.
What
Please
did
go
you
ahead.
say? You know,
I said,
I'm
I
multitasking.
just wanted you to give your closing thought on this matter. Do you think it's something that will be helpful for a state like Bauchi?
Okay. Sorry. Sean, if you see the kind of files I'm having now in my front. So sorry, you said
I think Ajasa is going to promise everybody a plate of rice after this meeting.
I'm close this video. I'll close the video. She gone.
Please go ahead.
So sorry, what am I supposed to do?
Okay, I'm just asking you your closing thoughts. Do you think Bauchi State is ready now for a gender responsive education financing framework?
Of course, since we've already domesticated this gender policy on education, and also we have a gender responsive education sector plan. Then what is the next line of action? Then it should be the gender responsive education financing for it to
Oh, great.
support the gender policy. I'm sorry, the gender sector plan, the gender responsive sector plan. So I think, of
Oh,
course, Bauchi State is ready, and maybe unless, let me just say to everybody, preparation are online on the pipeline on the issue of this particular aspect of the gender responsive education financing framework.
yeah, that's right. All right. Thank you so much for your
Since,
thoughts.
since you follow the right channel, everything will be done the way it's supposed to.
All right.
And
Somebody has
and
been
also
very
I pray
okay.
just the way we're discussing, and by the grace of God, we will ensure it's not going to be kept in the shelf. The
Beautiful,
fear of
beautiful.
the keeping it on the shelf. We will ensure that we abide and follow the guidelines and what have you.
Oh, beautiful. Well done for that commitment. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Somebody's hand has been up, and the person has also been active on the chat. Oluwaseyi Moses, are you there? I'm giving you 30 seconds to please ask your question. Yes, kindly unmute yourself right now.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you all to the team and the panelists. And I think this is very, very educative. However, I think I have a little bit of concerns because when we talk around gender issues, we oftentimes do not consider girls with disabilities. And because, of course, United Nations again on right of child's rights, and of course also with the United Convention on Right of Persons with Disability, also says all persons with disability also have right to education. And
Yeah.
the statistics are very clear that 9 out of every 10 out of 9 out of every 10 person with disability are out of school. And 9 out of these are actually girls. So what effort is being made to be very intentional that girls with disabilities are actually considered. Because if you make this toilet and this toilet are not inclusive, if you make these classrooms and these classrooms are not inclusive, you would have provided for girls, but you would have also exempted girls with disabilities. So I think this is really important that while we make all of these policies, we need to ensure that girls with disabilities are strategically considered. I would also like to say that I hear what Aja Saadatu have said around implementation, which is very close. But I also know that the disability law even passed in Bauchi State ahead of the national law. So what are the policies that are picked from these laws in ensuring that these gender responsive education policies are actually inclusive? And I would quickly like to use my few more seconds to ask, I think the first panelist who was also from the private sector, my question to him would have been that what is the private sector contribution to education in Nigeria? A lot of the private sector, I stand to be corrected, but aside, I don't want to, no one paid me for advert, so I don't want to call their names, but I know that you will see more shows, even at our campuses, at primary school level, more shows of bringing musicians, entertainment, other than contributing to the actual educational system. So I just want to ask, what is the role of the private sector, especially around their corporate social responsibility, and to congratulate the team for this very wonderful exposition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moses. Your thoughts are very, very clear and very, very excellent. This is lovely. I want to tell you that the framework that we developed is also going to be very, very sensitive to persons with disabilities. When we were developing the Bauchi State Gender Education Policy, as well as we also paid a very close attention to the component of persons with disability. That was a major part of the session. However, like you mentioned, we need to make more effort to ensure that they are not just included on papers, but in reality, in our thinking, in our actions, in our planning, and our implementations, they are considered and are given the fourth line. I think this is very, very important and clear. Thank you so much, everyone. I want to appreciate our panelists. Dr. Sana, thank you for joining us. Malam Ahmed, I appreciate your time and your commitment. Sani, my wonderful friend, thank you for the work you also continue to do in the north west part of this country. Like I was discussing with you, is quite commendable. Your work around the policies, engagements. And to others, Mr. Toba, Invictus Africa, my sincere condolence to your founder and the executive director, Mrs. Bukola Shonibare. I also want to appreciate Ajasa for staying from beginning to the end. I saw Aisha Kilishi. I'm seeing one of our board members, Mr. Dewale. It's so good to see all of you from different places. People from civil society organizations, from different groups, our change makers, our volunteers, our partners, Yaik, all of you. We are appreciative of you joining us for this meeting. And the wonderful people from the Youth Civic Engagement Program, I can see all of you. Mr. Bakari, good to see all of you. Mr. Nick Sakiofa, thank you for actively participating in this conversation today. What is the next step for us as an organization? We're hoping that immediately after now, we work to prepare a webinar report and share with as many of us as we can, just as we broadcasted the information. We also intend to put up a policy brief to document practical financing recommendations. And of course, next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, we are hosting the Bauchi State Gender Responsive Education Financing Framework Workshop. And then on Monday, we're having the Girls Budget Town Hall. Just like Asuna said, we are bringing in girls to make inputs into this conversation, right? And I want to appreciate the Minister of Budget, Minister of Education for always giving a listening ear to this conversation. I also want to tell you, in respect to what Mr. Moses said earlier, in the by February next year, we're going to be supporting the state to develop a private sector engagement strategy as well as a private sector PALI on education financing. We need to bring in private sector. And like Moses said, the finances are there. Dr. Kali also said the finances are there. We just need the expertise of the state to be able to harness it and gather them all together. Thank you all for joining from the beginning to the end. Sincerely, I'm excited about your contributions and your activeness. On behalf of the team at Young Leaders Network, I want to appreciate you all and wish you a wonderful conversation, post-conversation. Tomorrow, we are going to be having another conversation. You'll also be receiving some of these invites. We're looking at the GovWatch platform that the young leaders have been engaging through our accountability champions to track citizens nominated projects in Bauchi, Plateau, and Nasarawa State. You should try and make it a date, and you will enjoy and learn a lot from what you can also adopt from your own in your own respective states and work domain. Thank you so much, everyone. At this point, I want to bring the webinar to a close. Thank you, Ahmad. Are you still there, Ahmad? Thank you, Asana. Thank you for
Thank you.
joining us.
Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks. Our regards to Dr. Adoji.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you, Shona. Bye.
Please enjoy yourselves, everyone. Thank you. All right. Violence team, well done. And let's keep doing more.
Where is Charity?
Where's Charity?
Charity, show yourself. Ah.
All right. Thank you,
Okay, it's
Ajia.
going from this side.
Thank you, ma.